Welcome, everybody. My name is Alexander Opal Archambault. I'm a producer and shoutcaster for League of Legends, and I primarily work for Fun Plus Esports, as well as work on Riot's PCS on the English broadcast, as well as assisting with the remote studio here in Thailand, Bangkok. Like anybody else, I am currently in isolation because of the current, health climate around the world. I'm not going to get too much into that, but I know for a lot of freelance contractors, as well as, show-by-show workers, it's a bit of a scary time right now when it comes to your health on one hand, as well as job security. So today I wanted to show you guys how to use Amazon Web Services to pretty much drive your production using the cloud via vMix. A lot of people have started to kind of pick up on this, but there isn't really a good tutorial on where to start from. So I wanted to try and give you guys a bit of a heads up how to get started and what steps you can take after this to try and, up the ante when it comes to your production. It's a great workflow solution, especially for backup. We use it for a backup unit on PCS, and a lot of Riot products, in particular, the OPL, has shown publicly how exactly it works. So I'm going to kind of bring you guys through exactly what you need to understand and what you need to do. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing you're going to need to do is sign up for an Amazon Web Services account. If you're not able to do this, this is not the tutorial for you. Pretty much all you need to do, though, is provide your email, some basic info, maybe an address, as well as a credit card. Because, yes, unfortunately, this is not a free solution. You are renting a server space on the Amazon cloud, and you guys are using Volta GPUs. They're not going to let you just use it for free. Fair as that. The next thing I suggest you do is once you first boot up the EC2 dashboard, which I'll show you right now, it's my personal one, you're going to need to select the server that you want to be on. I'm currently in Bangkok, so I'm using the Singapore, but if you guys are in the US, you'll use US East or US West, and then there's also Canada and a little bit of Europe. So depending on where you are or where your production needs to take place, I suggest using the server closest to you. The next thing I recommend you to do, I'm not going to show you how, is to use the build a solution tutorial that you can see right there, launch a virtual machine. It'll take you step by step on how to make a micro instance, which is a really good, just kind of get you a little bit into how this all works. Because if you try and jump in immediately, this can be a little bit daunting. And you're going to need to do something to pass the time, because there is the next step, which is requesting an instance limit increase. That does take, it's not instant, it's not automated, it takes a couple of days. Because new accounts in particular have vCPU limits on them immediately, which means if you want to try and boot up a 64-core, cloud instance to run your super mega production, no, Amazon is like, we don't want you to spend all your money right away, because if you do use this inappropriately or you do kind of screw up, it can cost you a little bit of money, and I don't know how lenient Amazon is going to be to you. Luckily, I haven't had to run into that issue, but I'll show you exactly what you need to do. So first off, we need to figure out how much CPUs you're going to actually need to use for your production. And I'm going to show you right now the OPL system that is used by Riot over in Oceania. Right now, they actually run 2 instances of vMix on 2 separate AWS servers, one for the vision mixer and one for the audio. It's rather important for this because depending on your workflow, some things are going to change. You're also going to need to figure out what instances you need. So for vMix in particular, you're going to be running G4 instances. These allow you to use dedicated video cards or Volta GPUs that are on the server itself, and allows you to actually operate vMix, because vMix does need a dedicated GPU. It is a 3D application, and if you try and run vMix on pretty much something without a dedicated graphics card, you're going to have a bit of a bad time. Even considering you are running on Xeons, the Xeons, though, are good, they're not necessarily the best thing in the world. Like, I'd always take an i9 and a physical rig like I have right below me, rather than going with a cloud-based solution. But current climate, you're not going to be able to do that. So as you guys can see, they use one for the vision mixer and one for the audio. Now, I recommend you use what is called a G4DN 4X large. That is roughly a 16 CPU, 64 gigabytes of dedicated RAM, as well as a 225 gigabyte SSD. And say you want to know how much this is going to roughly cost for each one of these units. If you say use it for 3 broadcast days, so 8 hours for 3 days, so 24 hours a week, and then you factor in a little bit of the data costs because you also do have to pay for your data that you're going to be using on AWS, you're looking at roughly $300 a month, which isn't too bad. And this is actually on the more expensive end because I'm on the Singapore server. On the United States server, I think it's about 30 to $40 less. So of course, you need to apply for an instance increase. So we're going to go to your dashboard. This is your console. You're going to go into services and go to support. This is very easy to do. It's just a pain in the butt that you have to do it. So once you've loaded up your support center, you're going to go ahead, create a case, and immediately you're going to have to go in, hit service limit increase, limit type, go down until you see EC2, and then you're going to look at EC2 instances. Once you have that, you're going to just go down. You need to first select, is it general question? No, it's not that. It's region. So you're going to go ahead, select your region. I, for one, am on Singapore, but you also need to then select instance type, which is going to be G instance. And then you have to type in the amount of CPUs, vCPUs you're going to use. So we're using G4. That's roughly, well, it's G4 and then 4X. So the 4X, I believe, uses 16. 2X uses 8 cores. I don't recommend running vMix on anything below this as they can get a little bit touch and go. It's not as stable and you run into a bit of bottleneck. So for my solution, I use the 4X large. 4X large is currently a 16 CPU. So say you need 2 of those instances, you would type in 32. Now, if you're going to do this on more than one server, you're going to then need to add another request, pick the server that you're going to use. So say we want to set something up in the United States server in the East, so the Ohio server, or Ohio, geez, it's a little bit late, apologies, we just finished a show at PCS. Same thing, select G instances, and then type in your limit increase. You will then also have a little bit of an area where you can kind of describe what you're going to be using AWS for. I suggest you put in, I'm using it for online video production and back-end support. I need X amount of CPUs because this is what's been proven with our partners. Sometimes you get an automated response, just hit them back and say, hey, I have a show on the weekend. I want to try and use it like this. I want to give you some money. Usually it'll get approved. What they usually always do is kind of ramp up as your usage goes, at least on new AWS accounts. If you have a corporate account, this might be different. Might be different entirely. So with that out of the way, you're going to get that approved, hopefully, and you can move on to the next step, which is launching the instance. All right, so now we're going to aim to try and get your instance up and running. The first thing we need to do is get a Amazon machine image. Now what this is pretty much a template that we can work from that is kind of the foundation blocks when it comes to the instance you're going to be running on EC2. Now, most of the time, we want to just try and get ourselves the right criteria of what we need to check mark in order for vMix to run optimally when it comes to working on the cloud. First thing is we want Windows Server 2019. That's a little bit late here, apologies. And then, of course, we need grid drivers enabled. So grid drivers are the NVIDIA specific drivers that work with the GPUs that are within the data centers of AWS. Now, there are 2 ways we can go about this. The first way is absolute hell. It's manually installing the grid drivers, which I just tried for about the last 30 minutes just in case, and trust me, it is just not a fun time. Pretty much you need to make a bunch of credentials, and it is such a long tutorial that I'm actually shocked that there is absolutely no resources for this. If I ever get the opportunity, I'll try and make one as a little side tangent, but for now, we're going to go ahead and use actually a preset from the marketplace on Amazon. So what you're going to end up doing is go into services, go to your AWS marketplace subscriptions, and what we're going to be aiming to use is the Quadro virtual workstation. Now, the best way to do this is actually to go into Discover Products first, and then within that search bar that's going to be loading up here in just a quick moment, you're just going to go ahead and type in Quadro. and you should be able to find this relatively easy. It's actually the first one, and there you can see there's a couple of different versions as well if you want to try and run this on Linux or even Windows Server 2016 if you really think there's a big difference. I have actually been running a couple of vMix instances on that, and it's worked fairly well. So again, pick your preference. We're going to do what vMix recommends us to do, and that is to use the 2019 edition of the software. So all you have to do is go ahead, click on that. You'll go to continue to subscribe. Again, there is no actual cost to subscribing onto the software, at least for this one. And what you should do is go to more details underneath this little tab, and it shows you all the applicable instant types that can run on this. And there we go. We see G4. That's what we're looking for right now. You can see software per hour. It actually doesn't cost us anything. It actually costs us money if we run it on a P3 software. So we're actually saving money technically by using it the way that we're intending to. From there, you want to go ahead and select the region you're looking to launch it on. We're going to be on Singapore because I am, of course, in Bangkok. And then, of course, we go to continue to launch, and then we will launch through EC2 just to be a little bit more in-depth with how this works. So once we're done that, we're going to go ahead and launch, and then it'll bring us back into the EC2 manager. And from there, we can actually look to set up the rest of our server. So while this is loading, I am going to go ahead and just bring me over toward the side because you have a lot of cool little buttons over there in the bottom right that you need to do. So first step is to choose our instance. We already actually have our machine image that we got from the marketplace, so we're going to go all the way down until we see the available instant types. There we go, G4, and we are, for at least my personal taste, going to go with 4x large. You could go to 8x large if you are finding that you are hitting limitations. Most of the limitation, though, I believe is more or less in optimization, which again, I'm going to look a little bit more into and hopefully can sort this out. So from there, we're going to go to instant details. There is a whole plethora of information regarding this. The biggest one is number of instances. We're going to go with 1, and then your network. If you have already set up a subnet, which again is a whole other thing, but if you are planning on running multiple instances that talk to each other and maybe shares things like NDI connections, you're going to need to create a VPC and then as well as a subnet on the direct server. For now, we're just going to do default because we're not going to go in depth with regarding that. We're just trying to get vMix up and running so you guys can have a base to work from. From there, you're going to go with your subnet. Again, it depends on availability zone. This is the thing when you run on demand is you're at kind of the mercy of what everybody else is doing with the data center. If you want a dedicated host, there is something down the page, which is of course going to be Tenacity. So if you are wanting to, you can run on dedicated hosts. The only thing here is dedicated host will spike your costs. So be careful. For now, I think as long as you're just trying to learn how this all works to get your first instance of vMix running up and going, this is a good start. So from there, we're going to go ahead and add some storage. Default storage is 30 gigabytes. That gives you about 18 overall because 12 of that is used for your OS install. So do mind that. You can always add a little bit more. The instance itself will have a 225 SSD on it as well. So, you know, give or take. Again, it's a little weird with how all this works, so I'm not going to go into super depth regarding storage. I'm just trying to get you guys up and running. Then we hit the next button. It's add tags. I've never used that before. Hit the next button. It's going to be your server group. This is rather important. As you can see, we've already done a couple things, but for sake of showing this off, we're going to show you how to actually connect. So this is rather important because this is how you guys actually connect to your server. You need to set up this parameter. So we're just going to go ahead, put a dash on in there. So first off, you can see the warnings will tell you if something's bad. So if you don't have 3389 port open, you're not going to be able to actually connect to this. Now, my best course of action I would recommend is always make an assigned port for that itself and make it your my IP if you're planning on using it directly at this station that you're at the moment. Now, if you have it for, you know, other people, you can always whitelist their IPs using customs. For the sake of this tutorial, we're just going to hit anywhere to make sure I can still connect to it, and I'll show you why you can also use anywhere for other stuff. We're also going to add for all traffic. Again, don't recommend this. This is just for the tutorial. I'll show you how it works elsewhere. Is again, hitting all and allowing all the ports open. Again, dangerous. Do not do this. This is just for the sake of the tutorial because I am going to be deleting this instance immediately. Now that we have our security group set up, we can go ahead and review. It's pretty much just saying, hey, Anyone can connect to this if they have the IP, so don't be an idiot, and the password, of course. And then your instance configuration is not for free, which means I am going to be paying for this tutorial. Shocker. Now, let's go ahead, though, and launch it. If everything looks good, you come to this menu and you have to make a key pair. So if you never made a key pair, I suggest you make one. What it is going to be a little permission file that you just download to your desktop. This allows you to decrypt the Windows key so you can actually connect to the instance. I already have one enabled. Just be sure to acknowledge that you have access to the select and that without this file, you will not be able to actually log in. It's just pretty much saying, don't be an idiot. From there, we can go ahead and launch the instance, and if all works well, we should see a check mark here in just a moment after it does a little bit of loading here and there. And once that's done, we'll be able to wait for our server to load. And there we go. Our instance is now launching. We can go back to the dashboard by simply just clicking on this right here. And it'll bring us to our dashboard. You get to see a little bit of the mayhem as we've had a bit of up and down here. But as you can now see, our instance is online and going. So from there, we're going to go ahead and wait for it to do its service checks. And once it's good to go, we can connect to it. And I'll show you how to do that. All right, so now that we've let it kind of boot up right now, we can finally look to try and connect into the instance. So the first thing we're going to go on and do is go ahead, right-click, and then go and hit connect. First, you're going to download the remote desktop file. As you can see, you'll get to download. I've already done that, but the next thing we're going to have to do is decrypt the password. So first thing we're going to have to do is, of course, re-add that pair for the permissions key. Luckily, I have it on my desktop. That's why I said get it somewhere pretty much safe. Again, we're going to be deleting this permission afterwards, so you shouldn't be able to use it. First thing you're going to do, once you have that, decrypt password, and you'll have the password available to you right there. As you can see, go ahead, copy it to your clipboard. From there, we can go ahead, open up the remote desktop file, and then it will show us credentials. Just go ahead, copy, paste, hit remember me just to be extra sure, and then go ahead and hit OK. From there, it'll give you a couple things where you have to, of course, accept the certificates. Again, this is first time connecting, so this is normal for this. Again, it'll take a moment or two, and then once we're able to connect to the session, we'll get things up and running, and then we can start downloading the final prerequisites for vMix, as well as get vMix itself installed onto the server. As you can see, it's pretty fast to start up once you're able to get into it, but of course, give it a moment or two for the first minute or so once you've connected the server. You can think of this as a brand new install of Windows. It's just booting up the virtual machine for the first time, so sometimes it'll take a couple seconds to kind of get itself locked and loaded. We're also going to do a couple things. Of course, hit yes when it comes to the network, so that's good to go. And now we can start looking toward a couple of other different things. So first off, one thing I want to do is always enable the audio service, which is not hard to do. All you have to really do is hit your speaker setup right there, or go to sounds actually. Would you like to enable it? You hit yes. And then boom, you should be able to now hear the playback via the remote audio. That's like the first thing you should do when you get into the instance, because a lot of people forget that and then wonder, why do I not hear any audio from my vMix? Now, next thing I want to do is I want to make sure the grid drivers are actually running. And the first thing you can do, the easiest way you can tell this, is go into Task Manager, hit more details, and if it shows a GPU and performance, you should be good to go. So it does recognize that the Tesla is actually connected. You're running on a T4. Great sign. This is exactly what we want. Next thing you're going to have to do is, of course, download vMix. And to do that, you're going to have to download Chrome because you have Windows Explorer, the Internet Explorer actually enabled, and I'd rather use anything else in this world. So, of course, go ahead and just boot up Internet Explorer if you wish to. It should be good enough to at least get you into vMix. If you really hate Internet Explorer, you can always just go ahead and, yeah, like, as you can see, just, you know how it is. It's a fresh install when it comes to Windows. vmix.com will take you directly to where you need to go to. Oh, my lord, yes, in the future, does not show me this warning. Again, this is the annoying part when you first boot up a virtual machine. It's going to ask you, hey, do you want to add everything? Like I said, this is why I just download Chrome. This is actually why I download Chrome pretty much instantly when I ever boot up, because it actually is faster to download Chrome, go to the website, than it is to continue to add oh my lord, how little is an Internet Explorer? This is why we don't use you anymore. All right, you know what, just close it. Just close it. I don't care. I don't care anymore at this point. So go ahead, go and do your download. Again, just tell it to screw off, to be honest at this point. You know what you're going to do. You're going to go ahead and download vMix, which, again, shouldn't be taking you too long. Once you have that downloaded, we'll get to the next part, which, of course, is having to install the framework, because you do have to install the net framework in order for this to work, and we'll go from there. So now that we've downloaded vMix after, dealing with, of course, the hell that is absolutely Internet Explorer, we're going to go ahead and install it. Now, of course, if you are a vMix user, you should know instantly that usually off a fresh install of Windows, you're always going to hit a little bit of a roadblock, and that is usually because of Net Framework. Now, unfortunately, this is a little bit different when it comes to installing it onto a server. Luckily, I'm going to show you how to do that. So you're going to go down into your Windows key as always, and you're going to type in Server Manager. And cool. Now that we have it. Unfortunately, you cannot just easily install it like you usually do on a normal Windows computer. You have to go into the Server Manager, and from there, you can go ahead and do a little bit more. So once you're in here, you're going to go into Add Roles and Features. It's going to be like, are you collecting data? Blah, blah, blah. So you're going to let it collect data. So once this is done collecting the data of the server, we'll go ahead and install it. So I'll be right back. All right, it appears it's done categorizing the server or doing what you need to do. So you're going to go ahead and add roles and features. Just go through, you're going to select the server. There's only one server that you really have to, so of course you're just going to go ahead and hit next. Server roles, we don't really care at the moment. I don't least care. And it's literally the first thing on the list is Net Framework 3.5 features. Go ahead, hit next, and from there it'll ask you to confirm whether or not you want to do it. It'll ask you to also restart. Technically, you don't need to restart in order to install vMix. For the sake of this, we're not going to restart the server. We're going to go ahead and install the frame network, though. So let that happen. It'll take about a minute or so, and then once that's done, we can go ahead and install vMix. All right, so Frame Network was just finished installing, so now we can go ahead and close the Server Manager, and from there, you know what we're going to be able to do. We can go ahead and now install vMix. So again, you're just going to go over to your downloads or wherever you ended up saving your exe. Go ahead and install that. I also recommend installing another remote desktop software, something along the lines of possibly Parsec. There's also AnyDesk, something else to use, because remote desktop causes a lot of bugs, a lot of little issues. So that's going to save you a lot of trouble, and it's what we're going to switch to after we have installed vMix. And it's an easy install. It's just an exe, so install whatever software you feel is the best for your use case. But as far as everything else, you know how this goes. You go ahead, you install vMix, yada, yada, yada. Nothing too new right here. And what we do by installing it to the C drive is this goes into your I guess you could say roaming storage that's going to go from server to server. So this is actually a good base that you can start from. And then from here, you can make a snapshot that allows you to deploy this onto any server on AWS. So once this is done installing, we'll come back here and then we can see how things are working. All right, so we've been able to get vMix up and running rather very easily, which is a very good sign. Of course, the very first thing you want to do to ensure that your vMix is going to be running well, especially on AWS, is, of course, when you go into performance, is that it is using high import performance mode. You can also see that it is actually using the Tesla driver, which is good to see. That's exactly what we want to see as well. And display method right there, it looks like everything is good. And I'm just checking anything else. Oh, and if you're ever a vMix user, I'm going to tell you this right now for your own sanity. Preview is green. Output is red. Red means danger. Red should scare you. It should be scary to think something could be going live. And then other than that, there should be really nothing else that you have to really take a look at. Everything else has been working very well. So let's go ahead and just refresh the vMix really quick, and then we should be good to go. Of course, you can see it is using a trial. The one thing to note is you should be using a vMix key. If you guys have talked to the support, they are pretty open to the EC2 workflow, so your key will likely not get again, blocked or anything along those lines from being reactivated. Of course, vMix has kind of changed a little bit of their attitude regarding a lot of this kind of stuff where, keys were having to reactivate. I know my key has to reactivate almost every time that I have to relaunch the server because it does change a little tiny bit. It's not a carbon copy, unfortunately. And as always, you should be using an actual key for vMix. I just used a sample trial that I still had lying about because, of course, I'm going to be deleting this right away. But yeah, that's pretty much how you get vMix up and running on EC2. Now, if you want to be sure that your vMix is going to be running at peak efficiency, what I suggest you do is to go download pretty much any kind of just MP4. So we'll just go and get something away from Beeple. Beeple does really, really good VJ loops, and he puts out everything for download. It's easy loops. Easy, simple to do. And as long as this works, you should be good to go. So if you have an MP4 as well in any form, you guys can always go ahead as well as to just, again, load this onto your computer to make sure it works. You want to make sure that you do have an MP4 on hand because you need to make sure that the GPU is actually being utilized correctly. There have been times where, everything looks like it's fine and dandy, and then next thing you know, unfortunately, it doesn't work out. So once this gets loaded on, then you can see it's already here. And if I just hit loop, play, boom, we have audio coming on through, and you can see it actually loading on there. Now, reminder, it is a little janky because we are using desktop, the remote desktop feature. So, of course, you're going to see a little bit of hitching down there. But if you actually see, there's nothing actually dropping on the frames below. And we have noticed that if you have two video inputs loaded at the same time when you're using remote desktop, that can really cause issues. And, of course, you're probably also wondering, how do I get my audio input outside? Well, just be sure to go into your settings, and as long as you're using your correct audio output, so that is going to be your master output, it's going to be your remote audio. Pretty much you're going to go ahead and save. I am going to go ahead and turn that down just a little bit on this end just so it doesn't blow out. I'm actually going to mute it. And then all you have to do is, of course, hit OK. Once that's set, it'll restart as vMix does when you change audio settings. And then from there, you should be able to actually hear your vMix out remotely, which is very cool to have. I'm going to go ahead and just listen to it onto my other headset to be sure it's actually working. I think it is actually, which is good to see. So that's pretty much all you have to do. And that's how you get vMix up and running on EC2. As you can see, usage, GPU memory, you're only looking at 2%, and the CPU usage, you're only looking at 2%. The one thing I do recommend avoiding is using stuff like browser sources. Those can cause a lot of glitching, a lot of issues. And of course, I recommend using anything else but the remote desktop program to actually get into your EC2. Of course, you can use stuff like TeamViewer, Parsec, all of which are great alternatives, and they are actually considered more of a stream rather than a weird hitch that Windows does, and it can get a little bit funky. But that's going to be the basis of this tutorial. I'm going to be looking at possibly doing another one on how you guys can actually hook up your MIDI, so any kind of control surface that you may actually use, like something like an APC, something along these lines, and actually have its signal go remotely over the net into the vMix if you really crave having analog controls for, say, your audio or even things along the side as your buttons. And as always, too, you can easily connect to the web controller, so let's go ahead. It's right there. Of course, this is going to get deleted, so again, have fun trying to DDoS a non-existent server. So if we actually go on over to, I'm going to bring up a tab that's real on this computer via Chrome. We just go ahead, type it in, and we should have access to nothing, it seems. I got to double check the port on that then. So there is some ports that you'll have to put through. But overall, this is how you get vMix up and running. We'll go into small details, I think, onto the next video. It's a bit tiring. It was a little longer than I intended. We had some hitches there and there. But thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps you guys kind of get a little bit of a basis of how to get vMix at least up and running on EC2.